here we go.
I don't even think that makes it.
It never does. All right, so we're going to talk about action potentials with the heart. After depolarization and partial repolarization, there is a plateau phase, which means that there's a line straight like this. Okay, during which the membrane potential only slowly repolarizes. And the opening and closing of the voltage-gated ion channels produce the action potential. The movement of the sodium through the sodium channels causes depolarization. During depolarization, potassium channels close and calcium channels begin to open. Okay? And early repolarizing results from closure of the sodium channels and the opening of some of the potassium channels. Plateau exists because the calcium channels remain open. Okay, there's a plateau because there's a calcium channel open, so it stays steady. Okay, the rapid phase of repolarization results from the closure of the calcium channels and the opening of the potassium channels. Okay, refractory periods of the heart. There's two different refractory periods. There's the absolute refractory period, where the cardiac muscles are insensitive to further stimulation. And then the relative refractory period, where they're stronger than normal stimulation can produce an action potential. Okay, here, there's no way it's going to be stimulated. Here, if you overpower it, you can beat it and cause it to beat. Okay, you can cause the heart to beat here. Cardiac muscles have a prolonged depolarization and a prolonged absolute refractory period, which allows the time for the cardiac muscle to relax before the next action potential causes a contraction to happen. So here we see the repolarization phase and the depolarization phase. Depolarization phase, when the wave is going up. Repolarization is when it is going down. Okay? And then after that, we see that there is an early repolarization phase. And in that early repolarization phase, in some ways, we see that here we have a plateau phase. All right, let's look at this. Okay, permeability changes. Okay, meaning the ions are moving at different rates, and we got two different types going on here. We're going to talk about two different types of waves eventually, and this is going to represent those. Okay, I got a little video here that demonstrates how the heart contracts, or the waves, and how the channels. In a normal sinus rhythm, okay, your waves would look like this. You're going on this. If you look at an EKG, this is how it would look. 6 sinus rhythm. Remember what it looked like before. All right. We got a 6 sinus rhythm. Oh, we got a little shake in the rhythm. Okay. Atrial flutter. You know what? Atrial is fluttering. Your heart's beating too fast. Atria is pumping too hard to try to get into the ventricle. An atrial fib. You know what AFib is? That's going in a heart attack. Okay? This is what the waves would look like in a heart attack. Not that part. These doctors were having too much fun. Okay, Wolff-Parkinson-White waves. Okay, you got an uneven wave there. Your channels are opening and closing in a kind of a smooth, but not in the way which it's supposed to. The tachycardia. Notice the rhythm. Okay, you've got the atria and the ventricles contracting too quickly. Your heart can't recover. Okay, back into tachycardia. We need to shock him again. Okay. Bring in the crash cart. Pacemaker. How does the pacemaker help you? Okay? The pacemaker is going to initiate an electrical charge that tells your heart channels to open and close. This is just a couple of old doctors having way too much fun. So this is a normal rhythm. So then you would see that was kind of in here, you had that going and the foot going, normal rhythm. We got normal rhythms here. We saw what would happen if you got a little bit too much of an opening and closing. So the cardiac muscle, okay? Cardiac muscle here. We have the sodium, calcium, and potassium channel. All of these ions are important for the contraction of any muscle. Sodium, calcium, and potassium. Okay. See that the sodium channel is activated here. Okay. Allowing sodium to come from the exterior to the interior. It's passing through the channel. This causes the calcium cascade to begin to open. Okay. Calcium moves in, and then what gets pumped out would be the potassium, causing, okay, watch the waves over here. I'll do it again. All right, it's all at one time. All right, so here we got depolarization, sodium coming in, repolarization, we got the lag phase, okay, in that first part, and then the potassium moving out. That is when we get the depolarization. Okay, electrical activity of the heart. All the rhythmicity. Okay. Some cardiac muscles are autorhythmic because of the spontaneous development of a prepotential. A prepotential is slowly developed local action potential. Okay. The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. Okay. That's important to know. The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. Okay. The collection of cardiac muscles cells that are capable of spontaneously generating action potential. These are the collection of the cardiac muscles. So this is nothing in particularly. Okay, this is just cardiac muscle cells that are capable of generating action potentials on their own. None of the other parts of the heart have muscles that can do that, generate them on their own. The prepotential results from the movement of the sodium and the calcium into the SA node. The duration of the prepotential determines the rate in which the heart beats. Okay. The conducting system of the heart. This would be the SA node, the sinoatrial node, and the AV node, the atrioventricular node. Okay, and they're both found in the right atrium. The AV node is connected to the bundle branches and an interventricular septum by the AV bundle. Okay, and if you've ever heard someone say they had a bundle branch block, okay, bundle branch blocks can show up very well on EKGs because if that is blocked, then AV nodes are not getting what is needed. Okay, they're not acting very well. The bundle branches then give rise to Purkinje fibers, which will supply the ventricle. Okay. In the conducting system of the heart, the SA node initiates action potentials, and then they spread across the atria and cause them to contract. The SA node generates impulses at about 75 times per minute. Okay? 75 times per minute. Okay? How often does your heart beat? About 75 times per minute, right? Okay? Action potentials are slowed in the AV node, allowing the atria to contract and the blood to move into the ventricle. The AV node then delays the impulses for approximately 0.11 seconds. So it's a very quick action. Then the action potentials pass from the atria to the ventricles through the AV bundle, atrioventricular bundle. So now we're going to look at action potentials in the SA node. So this is what happens in the SA node. And what is the SA node? Sinoatrial is the pacemaker of the heart. Okay, so here we see in the pacemaker, the sodium channel opens first. It's the F part of the wave. Okay, we see the F part. Okay, calcium comes in. We've got the T part, the T wave. then we see this happening right here. We got the L part of the wave. Okay. Notice that these are a combination of the waves down here, or each individual activity, and this is what you see in the final wave as a result of which one's picking up one.
Slow down.
Okay.
The first thing that happens is the sodium channel. That's the F wave. The second thing that happens is the what channel?
The T.
Calcium.
The calcium going out with T.
Which is the T. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you said. And then the third thing that happens is what?
So the T's coming in, and then the L's going to pump the calcium out, or excuse me, pump more calcium in. Okay, and you get the big hump coming up right here.
That's potassium.
No, potassium is moving out constantly. Every time something comes in, potassium goes out.
Okay, thanks.
It's more about what's going in. Because when sodium comes in, potassium goes out. Calcium comes in, potassium goes out. Calcium's always going out in these action potentials. Yes, I know. Okay. So then you see that it keeps alternating. FTL, FTL, FTL. Come on. There we go. Okay, electrical activity of the heart. The conducting system. The AV bundle splits into two pathways. Okay? Those two pathways make up bundle branches. The bundle branches carry the impulse toward the apex of the heart. So what direction do they move? They move from the base of the heart to the apex. And they move from the top to the bottom. Purkinje fibers carry the impulse to the heart apex and the ventricular walls. So here's we can see the SA node, okay, being stimulated, and then the AV node being stimulated. So the SA node stimulates the AV node. So what pathway leads to AV stimulation? Atrioventricular node. The SA node stimulates AV. Also notice that the SA node also triggers the left atrium. Okay? SA node triggers both atrium and the AV node. But remember, there's a 0.11 second delay. Okay? 0.11 second delay between the SA node triggering the AV node. Okay? Action potentials originate in the SA, and then they travel to the AV node. Those action potentials then leave the AV node, okay? And along the AV bundle, okay, AV bundle, which extends through the lower portions of the heart, okay? It moves through the fibrous skeleton and into the intraventricular septum. The AV bundle then divides into right and left bundle branches. Okay, here we can see the bundle branches starting to occur. See how they're spreading out in different sizes. Those are bundle branches. And the action potentials descend to the apex of each ventricle along those bundle branches. Okay, and then we have more branching there into Purkinje fibers into part 4.
Action potentials originate in the sinoatrial node and travel across the wall of the atrium from the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node. Action potentials pass slowly through the atrioventricular node to give the atria time to contract. They then pass rapidly along the atrioventricular bundle, which extends from the atrioventricular node through the fibrous skeleton into the intraventricular septum. The atrioventricular bundle divides into right and left bundle branches, and action potentials descend rapidly to the apex of each ventricle along the bundle branches. Action potentials are carried by the Purkinje fibers from the bundle branches to the ventricular walls. The rapid conduction from the atrioventricular bundle to the ends of the Purkinje fibers allows the ventricular muscle cells to contract in unison, providing a strong contraction.
Okay, so notice, basically, the muscles start contracting at the top of the ventricle before they contract at the bottom. Okay? Muscles are contracting here before these muscles contract. Show that last little part again.
Allows the ventricular muscle cells to contract in unison, providing a strong contraction.
All right. So electrical activity of the heart. An electrocardiogram, or the ECG, records the electrical activities of the heart. The P wave corresponds to depolarization of the atria. The SA node. Then there's a QRS complex that corresponds to the ventricular depolarization. Okay, remember, QRS complex is going to correspond to the way that the ventricle starts contracting at the top before it contracts at the bottom. Okay, T wave corresponds to ventricular repolarization, and then atrial complex or repolarization is masked by the larger QRS complex. And based on the magnitude of the ECG waves and the time between waves, ECGs can be used to diagnose different heart abnormalities. Okay, so here we're going to look at the QRS complex, okay, P wave, and the T. Okay, what's going on here in the P wave? What's contracting? Atria. Okay, QRS complex. What's contracting? Depolarization, contracting, repolarization. That's the ventricles. And it masks when the atria are relaxed. Okay. Then we got the T wave. What was the T wave? Okay. Ventricular repolarization. Very good. Okay. Repetitive contraction and relaxation of the heart chambers is referred to as the cardiac cycle. Okay, an overview of the systole and the diastole. Okay, atrial systole is contraction of the atria. It's the lower number on the blood pressure, like 120 over 80, and then 80 would be the systole. Okay, systole is the of the contraction of the ventricle. Okay, diastolic is relaxation. Atrial diastole is relaxation of the atria, and diastole is relaxation of the ventricle. So when the atria are contracting, that is the diastole, but it's also the atrial systole. So don't get those confused, because systole is talking about ventricles. So systole without atrial in front of it refers to ventricles only. Okay. Systole, contraction of ventricles. Okay. Atrial systole, contraction of the atrial. So if the word atrial is in front of it, it refers to the atrial. If there's nothing in front of it, it refers to the ventricles. So systole would be the higher number, okay, your 120 number. Your diastole, or your atrial systole, would be your lower number, the 80. Okay. Overview of the systole and the diastole. Okay. During systole, the AV valve closes. Atrioventricular valves close, and pressure increases in the ventricles. The semilunar valves are then forced to open, and the blood flows into the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. At the beginning of the diastole, pressure in the ventricles decreases, and the semilunar valves close to prevent backflow of the blood from the aorta and the pulmonary trunk into the ventricles. Okay, and when the pressure in the ventricles is lower than in the atria, the AV valves open and the blood flows from the atria into the ventricle. So the blood flows from the atria into the ventricles when the pressure in the ventricle is lower than in the atria. Okay, during diastole. Okay, during atrial systole, the atria contract and complete the filling of the ventricle. Okay, atrial systole is diastole, okay, for the ventricle. So here you can use this slide to review the processes of the heart. In systole, the ventricles are contracting, atrials are relaxing. Okay. If the ventricles are in systole, the atrials are in atrial diastole. Okay. Here we see the beating of the heart, The ventricles are collapsing, pushing the blood out of the heart. Okay. Then we move down to diastole. In diastole, the ventricles are relaxing, atrium are collecting. In diastole, for the ventricles, the atrium are in atrial systole. Okay. Atrial systole then pumps that blood to the lungs, atrial systole pumps the blood back into the ventricles, filling the ventricles back up. Okay. In diastole. Diastole fills the ventricles by relaxing the ventricles and contracting the atrium. Okay. Events occurring during the ventricular systole. Ventricular depolarization, okay, is what produces the QRS complex. It initiates contraction of the ventricles, not the vesicle, but the ventricles, which increases the ventricular pressure. AV valves then close, semilunar valves open, and blood is ejected from the heart. The volume of the blood in a ventricle just before it contracts is the end diastolic volume. And the volume of the blood after contraction is the end systolic volume. Events occurring during ventricular diastole. Ventricular depolarization produces a T wave. Okay? So the T wave is produced during ventricular repolarization. The ventricles relax, and blood flowing back toward the ventricles closes the semilunar valves. Okay. Approximately 70% of ventricular filling occurs when blood flows from the higher pressure in the veins and atria to the lower pressure in the relaxed ventricles. Atrial depolarization produces the P wave. The atria contract and complete ventricular filling. The aortic pressure curve. The contraction of the ventricles forces blood into the aorta. The maximum pressure in that aorta is the systolic pressure. Okay? The maximum pressure in the aorta is systolic pressure. The elastic recoil of the aorta maintains pressure in the aorta and produces the dicrotic notch. Blood pressure in the aorta then falls as blood flows out of the aorta, and minimum pressure in the aorta is diastolic pressure. Okay, what does the heart sound like? Okay, you get this lupped up sound that should be associated with the closing of the heart valves when you listen to it. First sound occurs as the AV valves close, the lup, and the dup occurs when the SL valve, semilunar valves, close at the beginning of ventricular diastole. All right. So as the heart has blood flowing through it, move into the atrium, down to the ventricles pump it out. We can see the valves that are beating. Okay. All right. So your aortic semilunar valve, okay, and your tricuspid and your bicuspid valve. Okay. The dup sound is produced by the aortic semilunar valve and the pulmonary semilunar valve. The lup is produced by the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve. Lup, dup, lup, dup. Okay. Okay, events occurring during the cardiac cycle. From here down, don't get lost. Just pay attention to the top part. The PQRS and the T part. Don't worry about this. PQRS, T. If you need to look at this to make the top make sense, do that. But don't look at this and think that you're going to have to memorize this part. But you do need to know the PQRST part. Okay. And if you know your alphabet, that will help here. P, Q, R, S, T, right? And it does go in order in the alphabet, so that's nice. So it helps out with that. What's going to happen first, the P? What's going to happen last, the T? The R is where you're going to have your biggest peak because that's when your contraction is occurring. Okay, summary of the events. Okay, I'll just let you look over this on your own. You got the download of the PowerPoint there, 17.1 and 7.2. We'll check out this video real quick.
A single cardiac cycle is made up of the events associated with one heartbeat. Each cardiac cycle takes about 0.8 of 1 second. During each cardiac cycle, pressure changes occur within the chambers of the heart as they relax and contract. As the chambers relax, they fill with blood. This is called diastole. When the chambers contract, the blood is expelled. This is called systole. At the beginning of the cardiac cycle, the atrioventricular, or AV valves, open. This allows blood to begin to flow into the ventricles from the atria. At the same time, the pulmonary and aortic valves are closed, preventing blood in the pulmonary trunk and aorta from entering the ventricles. Ventricular filling is completed by atrial systole, or contraction. This contraction results from a series of events beginning with the spread of action potentials from the sinuatrial, or SA node, across the walls of the atria. This results in atrial depolarization, which is represented by the P wave on the electrocardiogram, also called an ECG or EKG. Atrial depolarization initiates contraction, or systole. Atrial systole is represented by the PQ segment on the ECG. Near the end of atrial systole, impulses from the SA node reach the AV node. At this time, impulses spread from the AV node along the ventricular conduction fibers to the walls of the ventricles. This results in ventricular depolarization, which is represented by the QRS complex on the ECG. The atria repolarize, the walls relax, and they remain in diastole for the rest of the cardiac cycle. Atrial repolarization is not seen on an ECG because it is masked by the QRS complex. In ventricular systole, or contraction, increased pressure in the ventricles forces the AV valves closed. The heart sound associated with the closure of the AV valves is known as S1, often described as love. With continued contraction, ventricular pressures increase until they are higher than those in the pulmonary trunk and aorta. At this point, the pulmonary and aortic valves open and blood is ejected from the ventricles. Ventricular systole is represented by the ST segment on the ECG. In ventricular diastole, or relaxation, the ventricles repolarize. The T wave on an ECG represents ventricular repolarization. Ventricular relaxation results in decreasing ventricular pressure. During ventricular diastole, blood in the pulmonary trunk and aorta flows back toward the semilunar valves, causing them to close. The heart sound associated with closure of the aortic and pulmonary valves is known as S2, often described as dub. After the aortic and pulmonary valves close, pressure in the ventricles continues to decrease. When intraventricular pressure falls below the pressure in the atria, the AV valves open and the cardiac cycle begins again.
Oops. Doggone it. I skipped the last part of that. I won't make you go back and have to watch it at the moment. Okay. Mean arterial blood pressure. Blood pressure. Okay. Mean arterial pressure is the average blood pressure in the aorta. So it's all based on your blood pressure in your aorta. Adequate blood pressure must happen because it has to have enough pressure for it to flow throughout the entire body to reach even the tissues at the furthest extent. If you have low blood pressure, you're not getting blood adequately to your tissue. If you have too much blood pressure, it's flowing at a rate that is very difficult for the body to absorb it. So blood pressure is very important. Proportional to cardiac output. Blood pressure is proportional to cardiac output. If you're exercising vigorously, your cardiac output is going to be higher because it's pumping harder and having to supply your tissues at a greater rate. So the cardiac output is increasing and your blood pressure will increase as well. Okay. So it has to do with not only your cardiac output, but the peripheral resistance. How much your tissues are resisting the flow of the blood. Okay, but you can use the formula down here, cardiac output times the peripheral resistance to figure out how much blood pressure or how much adequate supply of blood that you're getting to your tissues. Okay. Cardiac output is a product of the heart rate and the stroke volume. So if you take those two and you multiply them together, you get the cardiac output. Heart rate times the stroke volume. Heart rate is the number of heartbeats per minute, and the stroke volume is the amount of blood pumped out by a ventricle with each beat. Okay, SV is the end diastolic volume minus the end systolic volume. Okay, the stroke volume is equal to the end diastolic volume minus the end systolic volume, excuse me. Okay. The end diastolic volume equals the amount of blood collected in a ventricle during diastole. Okay, and ESV, end systolic volume, is the amount collected or remaining in a ventricle after contraction. Cardiac output, heart rate, it shows the formula there, how you would multiply those two together, and how much you would get per liter per minute. Okay.
Do we need to know math? This test?
You might have to multiply two numbers together to either get the stroke volume or.
I really thought I was done with math.
Oh, it's just multiplying. It's not algebra. You'll never be done with it. You'll never be done. Venous return is the amount of blood returning to the heart. Okay. Increased venous return increases stroke volume by increasing the end diastolic volume. The stronger the contraction, okay, causes the volume to be decreased in the end systolic volume. Just a second, I'll check our progress and see where we're at. 57 to 66.
Are we finish this?
We're going to get this finished in about 10 minutes or less. I'm going to fly through the next part. No. Okay. All right. Extrinsic regulation, okay, modifies the heart rate and stroke volume through the nervous and hormonal mechanism. Okay. The medulla regulates the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous control of the heart. Okay. Your two main neurotransmitters to know for the heart are epinephrine and norepinephrine. And they're released into the blood from the adrenals, okay, the adrenal medulla, and as a result of sympathetic stimulation. Okay. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are part of the sympathetic pathway, and they increase the rate and force of the heart contraction. Okay. So both epinephrine and norepinephrine increase the heart force contraction. Parasympathetic stimulation is supplied by the vagus nerve. Okay, so parasympathetic is by the vagus nerve, and it decreases the heart rate. Okay, and here what we're looking at is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is going to cause a decrease in the heart rate and increase the membrane permeability to potassium. So remember, potassium is what's pumping out every time. Well, if it's coming in, it's going to slow down the heart. Okay? Hyperpolarization of the plasma membrane increases during the prepotential. Okay? Prepotential potassium has to come in order to get pumped out during a heartbeat. Okay? And the sympathetic stimulation is supplied by the cardiac nerve. Parasympathetic is the vagus. Sympathetic stimulation of the heart is the cardiac nerve. cardiac nerves and sympathetic stimulation increases the heart rate and the force of the contraction. And here we're talking about norepinephrine. Okay. Epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay, remember, it's going to cause the heart to speed up and stroke harder. Affects the blood pressure. Okay. Without the blood pressure being in an adequate amount, the baroreceptor reflexes working properly, the decreased heart rate and stroke volume will cause a lack of blood to the tissue. So blood pressure is essential. You must get blood to the tissue.
Increased blood pressure stretches the carotid arteries and aorta, causing the baroreceptors to increase their basal rate of action potential generation. Action potentials are conducted by the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves to the cardioregulatory and vasomotor centers in the medulla oblongata. As a result of increased stimulation from the baroreceptors, the cardioregulatory center increases parasympathetic stimulation to the heart, which decreases the heart rate. Also, as a result of the increased stimulation from the baroreceptors, the cardiovascular center decreases sympathetic stimulation to the heart, which decreases heart rate and stroke volume. The vasomotor center decreases sympathetic stimulation to blood vessels, causing vasodilation. The vasodilation, along with the decreased heart rate and decreased stroke volume, bring the elevated blood pressure back toward normal. If the initial problem were a decrease in blood pressure, the activities and effects of the baroreceptors, cardiovascular center, and vasomotor center would be the opposite of what is illustrated. Chemoreceptors in the carotid and aortic bodies monitor blood oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH. Impulses from these chemoreceptors are conducted to the control centers for heart and blood vessels via the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves. Chemoreceptors in the medulla oblongata monitor blood carbon dioxide and pH. Decreased blood oxygen, increased carbon dioxide, or decreased pH decrease parasympathetic stimulation of the heart, which increases the heart rate. Decreased blood oxygen, increased carbon dioxide, and decreased pH increase sympathetic stimulation of the heart, which increases heart rate and stroke volume. Increased sympathetic stimulation of blood vessels increases vasoconstriction.
All right, so now we're going to move it towards the wrap-up stage of the heart. We just got a couple of pieces of information. The heart homeostasis, the effect of pH, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. How, these are important. The need for oxygen causes the heart to beat. The overabundance of carbon dioxide will cause the heart to beat at a higher rate. Okay, the carotid body and the aortic chemoreceptors monitor blood oxygen levels. So you got two things that monitor blood oxygen levels: the carotid body and the aortic chemoreceptor. Okay, the medullary chemoreceptors monitor blood pH and carbon dioxide levels. Chemoreceptors are not important for the normal regulation of the heart, but are important in the regulation of respiration and blood vessel constriction. Okay. The chemoreceptors are not important for normal regulation, but are important for regulation of respiration and blood vessels. Okay, so here we see the normal pathway going through here. Medulla oblongata is going to stimulate, okay, in response to the baroreceptors in the aorta. Carotid body and chemoreceptors here, okay, are going to stimulate the pathway. Okay, parasympathetic nerve fibers here are going to be sending information to the heart. And that information is sent out to cause the heart to either beat or not beat at the same rate. It may speed up or it may slow down. Parasympathetic nerve fibers, if it's parasympathetic, it's not going to speed up. Parasympathetic will cause it to slow down, right? Sympathetic nerve fibers are going to cause it to speed up. And remember the difference between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Parasympathetic is usually a straight pathway, and usually you have a mediator in a sympathetic pathway because you have those nerve centers of the body that help with the transmission. Okay? Or we have the adrenal medulla. Okay? And medulla is going to release what two things? Epinephrine or norepinephrine. Okay? And it's going to cause the heart to beat harder. Okay? And stronger. Okay? And we see this pressure regulation happening here. Okay, the homeostasis is disturbed by a change in that's either picked up by the baroreceptors or a change that's caused by either a neurotransmitter or an extra input from the adrenals through epinephrine or norepinephrine. Okay, if it's the baroreceptors, you're usually going to trigger the parasympathetic. Okay, and help to restore the blood pressure by slowing things down. If it's on this side, the heart's slowing down, then these baroreceptors are going to send information back to the brain or the adrenals to release norepinephrine and cause homeostasis to be restored by causing a stronger heartbeat. Okay? Effects of ions and the body temperature. Increased extracellular potassium will decrease the heart rate and stroke volume. Decreased extracellular potassium decreases heart rate. Okay. If there's less potassium outside of that cell, it will slow down the heart rate because there's a membrane potential that has to happen because potassium has to get pumped out. If there's more outside than there is inside, that membrane potential cannot occur very well. Increased extracellular calcium will increase stroke volume and decrease the heart rate. Okay. And decreased extracellular calcium levels will produce the opposite effect. Remember, this is why you need to make sure that you eat plenty of potassium if you're going to exercise. The potassium must be in the cells to produce a strong heart rate and muscle contraction because potassium always gets pumped out during contraction. Okay. Heart rate increases when body temperature increases, and it decreases when body temperature decreases. Why does it increase when the body temperature increases? What is it about oxygen that changes when body temperature increases? The hemoglobin in the blood can't hold it as well at higher temperature. Blood doesn't dissolve well in water at higher temperature, oxygen does not dissolve well in water at higher temperature, so once it passes from the hemoglobin to the tissues, it does not stay dissolved as well at higher temperatures, so the demand for the blood to pump is higher in higher temperatures. Okay. Effective aging on the heart, it's going to get weaker, right? Some age-related changes to the heart include decreased cardiac output, heart rate, increased cardiac arrhythmias, changes in the heart rhythm, hypertrophy, or enlargement of the left ventricle, development of stenosis, or incomplete valves. The valves start to destroy themselves, and development of coronary artery disease and heart failure. Exercise can help improve all of these things over the life.